Good morning. Happy 2025. So, so we took January off. We've been doing that since 2020. We thought maybe we're going to take today off because of this weather. So we're happy to be indoors here and happy to have you join us. There's plenty of coffee today. We knew there'd be fewer people today. But this is great to get back together. And do you know I missed the last 3 from last year? So I'm happy to see you guys. I don't even know where I was. I was different places. So I'm glad to be here. And we have some wonderful education partners that make this possible. And you're going to hear from some of them today. Jason, would you like to start? This is real important. If you're 18 years of age or older. 18, we want you to have your essential documents in place, and so Jason's going to talk about that.
Well, good morning, everyone. Well, for some of you frequent flyers at Empowered Seniors, you've heard me talk before about some of the things I'll talk about today, but it's always a good reminder, I think, for everyone, whether or not you have estate planning documents in place, or it's something that's been on your list of to-dos and you haven't got around to doing it. If you have documents in place and you have an estate plan that maybe you put in place 20, 30 years ago, it's a good idea to review what you have, because oftentimes I run into clients that I meet with and they look back at their old documents and the people they named to help them out, take care of their affairs, maybe serve as their executor, aren't the right people to do that anymore. They are probably contemporaries of them. Maybe they've passed away. And so if you have done some estate planning, it's a good idea to dust off those documents, take a look at them, and see if they still match what your current situation requires. And so I want to talk a little bit about those essential documents that you really need. And I say need, it's sort of like an ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure. So you have other sort of corollaries to the law, maybe health, taking care of yourself, keeping yourself in good shape, good nutrition, diet. That goes a long ways to prevent some more serious health effects down the road. Taking your vehicle in to get routine maintenance, making sure that it's operating correctly, it's safe, is maybe going to prevent a catastrophic breakdown in a situation or a time where it's not convenient for you, and it could also lead to quite a bit more cost. So I find in the estate planning world, the folks who truly appreciate the need to have a good estate plan in place are folks who've gone through a situation with a parent or a spouse or another individual close to them who did not have their affairs in order. And as Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's late business partner, he's has a quote, and I'm not going to quote it. I'm going to paraphrase it because I will probably misquote it. But hard lessons that can be learned vicariously are better than hard lessons that you have to learn yourself. And the reality is, as I mentioned before, I meet with a lot of people, and I would say probably half of the people that are, have really sort of recognized the need to get some of these things in place and their affairs in order are people who have learned that lesson themselves and appreciate the need. So what are some of those documents? Again, I've discussed this before to the group for some of you folks who come regularly, but first would be a will. That's what a lot of people think when they think about their estate planning. And a will is a necessary document. When I say necessary, can you get by without one? Sure, you can get by without ever changing your oil in your car, too, for a while. And then you're going to have a catastrophic event. You're going to have increased costs because you didn't take care of those things in advance. And the same thing goes with a will. A will serves to make sure that your wishes that you want to have carried out after your death are. And a will also ensures that the person or persons that you want to be in charge of managing your affairs when you're gone are going to be put in place to do that. And so while there's, many of you might be thinking, well, I've got a checking account and I've got a beneficiary named on that, or an investment account, or maybe I have a deed to my home set up so that I've got a son or daughter or other person who's named as a joint owner of that property, or a transfer on death beneficiary. And these types of estate plans can sort of get by in certain circumstances. But a will is going to bring everything together. And so beneficiary designations on accounts, those will pass out to the beneficiary. Life insurance is another example of where people may have a life insurance policy set up, and that's a way that they intend to bless individuals. And certainly with some of those assets, wills aren't necessary. But there are assets that you simply can't pass by beneficiary designations. Think of all the stuff in your house. Some people have houses full of assets. Those are some of the most difficult estates to deal with, and particularly when there's not a will in place. A will has to go through probate. And probate is a process where the courts get involved, and the courts make sure that the will is followed and the will's adhered to. You go through probate if you don't have a will, but if you have a will and you go through probate with a will, it's going to make the entire process far more simpler. And it's also going to do something else. It's going to make the process far more less expensive. So going through probate with a will versus not a will saves your estate and saves your beneficiaries and the people who you want to bless with your property a lot in terms of financial cost and expense, court fees. There's other requirements to sell property, sell real estate, personal property, that if you don't have a will, there's increased costs, increased court involvement. There are things such as bonds that are required, where the person who's appointed to administer your estate has to go to an insurance company and get a surety bond if there's no will that waives that requirement, and that's an additional cost. And so this is that sort of ounce of prevention of getting something like a will in place to avoid some of those additional expenses down the road. So another instrument that is somewhat of a will substitute would be a trust. And trusts are different in the sense that trusts don't have to go through probate. A trust is a mechanism, if you will, where you title your assets in a way that they're held in, if you think of it this way, as, say, a corporation. You know, if you formed a corporation that operated a business, that corporation would have shareholders and would have a CEO and would have other people involved that are named in advance. And if one of those individuals were to die, well, the corporation still exists. The corporation still goes forward. Those roles just need to be substituted. And a trust is very similar. If you set up a trust, you move all of your property, you retitle it into the trust. Now, during your lifetime, you're the trustee of the trust, and you're also the beneficiary of the trust. So while you're alive and in charge, you almost don't notice it, other than title to things may say John Smith as trustee of the John Smith Trust. Other than that, you're free to do whatever you'd like with your property, and there's no interference with your use or enjoyment of your things. But what happens is when you can't serve as trustee of your trust anymore, the trust instrument, the trust agreement, would you would have had selected a successor trustee, a child, a trusted friend, some other family member, who would be able to slide right into that role and manage your affairs with you without having to go through court, without having to go through probate or guardianship proceedings if you're still alive, but you can't manage your affairs anymore. So trusts have advantages over wills. Other advantage, I meet with a lot of folks who have an idea of what they want, and at times their goals can be met only with a trust. So what do I mean by that? A will, I always refer to a will as a blunt instrument. It operates at your death, and it passes property to the people named in the will through that probate process that I discussed a minute ago. But that's all it does in terms of assigning a piece of property to a person, and then it's theirs, and they can do what they want with it. And I have clients oftentimes that have some concerns because of their unique situations. Maybe they've got a son or daughter who's in a marriage that they don't approve of, or maybe it's not a great relationship. And there's concern that if I leave my son or daughter this property, that their spouse is going to be involved, and maybe there could be a divorce and their spouse would end up receiving part of the property that I left for my child. I don't want that. Or an individual with a child who's disabled, or somebody who they want to leave property to who's disabled and maybe receives government assistance, government benefits that's tied to their income and their assets. And the concern is if I leave my son or daughter property, they're going to be disqualified from the government assistance that they're receiving. And so I don't want to do that. And so I meet with people at early stages oftentimes where they say, I've got a son, a daughter, my son's disabled, receiving government assistance, so I'm going to leave everything to my daughter because I can't leave anything to my son, or he'll get kicked off his benefits. Well, early on in those conversations, we start talking about trusts and ways that trusts can be set up so that those assets after your death don't pass directly to that disabled person, but instead the trust is drafted in such a way that they can still receive benefits from that trust, but the government will not consider that an available resource. And so they can continue to receive their government benefits and also benefit from the trust, which is what their parent was hoping to do. So trusts are an essential document, an essential component of an estate plan if you want to control anything to do with your property after you're gone, if you want to delay distributions. Another example would be to minor children or to young individuals that you have concerns if they were to receive a substantial amount of property, and substantial is a relative term. For a minor child, receiving $50,000, or somebody who's in their 20s receiving $150,000, I think probably the room would agree that at those ages, most individuals would probably not deal with that property in a responsible way. I've certainly seen it more times than I can count where a young person receives property that probably everybody in this room understands it's not really a lot. It sounds like a lot, but it goes quickly, and that money's gone almost instantaneously. There's a new car, there's a vacation, there's friends that convince them to buy things they don't need, and it's gone. So a trust is a way for you to continue to have exercise some sort of control over your property and how your beneficiaries receive it. And so I go back to the will being a blunt instrument. Wills are great, and in a lot of people's circumstances, wills are completely suitable for your situation. But a will is going to just transfer property to that person, and you can't control what they do. I find this with farming families quite a bit, where you have a lot of land tied up in, a lot of the family wealth is in property. real estate, and they have a child who's helping out with the farm and a couple others who have gone off and done other things. And the sort of simplistic approach is, well, I want Billy to continue to be able to farm, so we're going to leave the farm operation to Billy. And the issue that they run into is, well, we don't want to penalize our other children who didn't remain on the farm, who didn't participate in the family business, but we don't know what to do. And so situations like that is where a trust comes in, where the farm ground could be held in a trust for a period of time. And that could take any sort of different form. You could say 10 years, 20 years. You could say so long as the beneficiaries agree. There's a ton of creativity that can be involved in drafting those provisions. But you could leave the farm in a trust where Billy gets to farm it, and some of the income goes to his siblings, and allow that arrangement to go on for a while. Maybe you have a home and you have a child who's living in the home with you, and you want them to continue to be able to live in that home, but when they no longer are using it as their home, you'd like it to be sold and divided among your child's siblings as well. Trusts are a vehicle to do that with. So just sort of keep in mind the difference between a will and a trust. A will, absolutely adequate, perfect for many people's situations. But if there are things in your life that that give you some concern, or your objectives in order to meet them are to do something more than just give property outright to individuals, then a trust is a good option there. And as I mentioned before, a trust also avoids probate. So there's no need to go to the court. There's no need to necessarily get attorneys involved, although I do think it's best whenever somebody's appointed as a trustee to at least stop in and talk to an attorney for a little bit and get some advice and direction if they're not familiar with the process. So those are documents that are essential dealing with your property after your death. But a good estate plan and a complete estate plan also involves documents that deal with your situation while you're alive, but you're not able to manage your affairs anymore. And those are powers of attorney. Many of you probably have those in place. If they were done 20, 30 years ago, again, I would recommend pulling those out and looking at them and seeing if they're still current, see if the people that you named are still the people that you want to have serve. A lot of people are surprised to know you can appoint more than one person. So if you have 2 children, you could appoint co-agents under those powers of attorney documents. And you can put conditions. You can say, well, I want both of these agents, both of my children, to have to agree on decisions. Or you may trust both of them and say they can both act independently. I just want to give all of them or both of them the authority to assist me if that's needed. So the powers of attorney will deal with 2 categories of things. One's going to be your finances and your property, and so you'll have a power of attorney for that area of your life, and the other is going to be for your health and medical decisions. And so the person you name to manage your affairs for you, your finances and your property, might not be the same person you want to have make your medical decisions. Maybe it's because their field of practice. Maybe you have a daughter who's in the medical field and a son who's in construction. Maybe the son's managed a business and you think that might make more sense for him to manage the finances, but your daughter who's a medical professional would have more knowledge with healthcare medical decisions. I certainly know I'm that case. My wife's a registered nurse. And I tell you, when she's unavailable and I have to take the kids to the doctor's appointments, she's quite disappointed with me in the questions I did not ask, the information I cannot come back with, and my overall lack of ability to explain what we did at that appointment. So I know firsthand I probably wouldn't be the best person. She would be far more suited to that role than I would be. But if you don't have, here's the ounce of prevention and pound of cure overlay to the powers of attorney. If you don't have them in place and you lose capacity, the law steps in, and there is a process by which you have somebody appointed for you. You're not going to be able to appoint them because you didn't do so at a time you were able to do so. But the courts will, and that's through guardianship and conservatorship proceedings. The downsides, well, let's start with the positives. The positives are if somebody does not have anything in place, there is something in the law that allows and offers a solution. That's the upside. We've got more downsides to it. One downside is cost. The cost of a guardianship and conservatorship to get set up and in place, even an uncontested one, and we'll talk about contested ones, but even an uncontested one will cost $2,500 to $3,000 to get that in place, to go through the court system to do that. The person applying for the guardianship has to have an attorney, then the court must appoint an attorney for you. If you're impaired, a court-appointed attorney for you. And the process then requires annual accountings to the court by the guardian and conservator. It could, in the case of a conservator, a bond, again, be required, a surety bond to cover the value of all of your assets, which is an additional cost. And so I talk about the initial cost of a few $1,000s to get that set up. Then there's ongoing costs as well. That's an uncontested guardianship. What is not uncommon is to have a contested guardianship because you didn't get in place or you didn't have your wishes known who you want to be the one to fill those roles. There could be some disagreement among your children as to who's the appropriate person to do that. Whatever we think of our own families and whether or not my kids would ever fight about those sorts of things, or whether my kids would ever have disagreements that would lead them to attorneys' offices and having a fight in court over me or my affairs, it happens to the best of us. I'm personally going through it with my own grandmother, and I'm seeing my father and his siblings have disagreements over the care that my grandmother is receiving. Now, I'm vicariously, by choice, observing this because I'm not getting involved, even though as the, quote, lawyer in the family, I'm the one who gets the text messages or the calls, and I've had to tell many people, I can't be in the middle of this. But I would have never thought that would have happened with my family. There's a lot of what they all refer to each other as bullheadedness in the family, but there's a lot of strong wills and strong opinions. And although I felt that they would be able to work these things out and could not foresee a situation like this, it's sort of come to my own doorstep. And I see it a lot with a lot of clients that I meet with, and I do guardianships and conservatorships as well. So I get to see that when there's not a plan in place, and what you find is when a lot of these things just aren't talked about. There's assumptions that people are going to agree, or there's assumptions that, well, of course this is what we're going to do when mom declines or when dad passes away. And I find that those assumptions that are held by various people rarely align, particularly if they had not had that conversation in advance. And so you, at this point in time, have the opportunity to resolve a lot of that. And that's by making your wishes clear, designating the people that you want to designate, that you want to have serve for you. And you can avoid your a lot of grief for your family in doing that, and you are able to make sure that you're in control of your plan, and the wishes that you want carried out are carried out and followed. And I'll name one other document that's important to have, and that's a living will. A living will, or a declaration, is what it's technically called. You might see it be called as a declaration. Falls under the category of advanced directives. And this is a document whereby the law allows you to make end-of-life decisions. If you have a terminal condition, serious accident, and the doctors determine that because of medical technology we can keep this person alive, but they're not going to recover from their condition, their illness, their injury, you have the right under Kansas law now to say, I want to be able to die peacefully. I don't want to be in a hospital room being kept alive at all costs on machines. I want to be able to control that decision. And so that's another component of an estate plan, if that's something that you feel strongly about, that you should have in place, because that's also a difficult decision. Again, one of those lessons that are hard learned. I find individuals value that document a lot more if they've had to go through a situation where they were confronted with that decision for another person. And they don't know what that other person's wishes were. They don't know that they're making the right decision. And they come into my office and say, absolutely, I want that in place because I don't want anybody else to have to go through that decision that I had to do and I had to wrestle with. I want to make my wishes clear and my wishes known. So, well, any questions? Yeah. Correct.
Why?
Well, a will...
I mean, unless it's contested, why would you have to go through probate?
Sure. So a will guides the probate process. So for instance, if you have a home in your own name and you pass away, the will may say this goes to my son. Well, when your son tries to sell that property, the title company is going to say it's not owned by him. It's got to go through probate in order to pass to your son. Now, your will guides that process. Your will directs it to your son. And without a will, then your property would just pass to whoever your heirs at law are. But the will only guides the probate process. And in fact, a will under Kansas law has to be filed with the court within 6 months from a person's death. Otherwise, it's invalid. So in order for a will to be valid, it's got to be presented and filed with the court. And so I guess to the question of why it has to go through probate, that's just the way the law is. And certainly with things like, you can get around it a little bit with things like personal property. You know, this chair here, you know, you don't have to go through a title company, or you don't have to go to the DMV and get a vehicle titled. You know, there certainly are ways in which you could state your wishes in your will and kind of hope that they're followed with respect to some of that non-titled property. But anything that requires a piece of paper to sign or to show you own it, unless there's beneficiaries named on that, unless there's some joint ownership arrangement, if you die owning property that has a piece of paper, a deed or a document, a title, or other sort of documentation, that property must go through probate in order to either pass to your heirs or pass to your beneficiaries.
Okay. I've only been through one process, and it was with a trust. We went to a lawyer, and he said we don't need a trust in Kansas. A will do. That's what he told me. I wanted a trust because I believe that a trust was easier for me as an executor to go through the whole process and just get it done without going through probate.
Well, I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that just sort of general statement. Now, I will agree, and I mentioned it here today, so a will in and of itself could be appropriate for individuals. It's got to go through probate, but going through probate with a will is far better than going through probate without a will, just because of the administrative costs and other things that go along with it. So,
I just didn't understand, why do you have to go through probate if there's no contest, if it's not contested?
right.
People that you have listed in the will are going to dispose of your property, sell your house, sell your car, whatever.
Right.
Why would it have to go through probate?
That's why a good fresh start for 2025
Right.
is to go meet with Jason in person about all your individual things so he can figure out how to help you navigate and make everything happen just the way you want.
But if you got two lawyers telling you two different things.
But we got the best one because guess what his specialty is, you guys? Get this. I'd bank on Jason. His is contested estates. So this is like the supreme expert. Yeah. We'll take two more quick questions, and we're going to bring Dr. Ray up.
The document transfer on death,
Sure.
is that included with the will, or is that all you have to go everywhere separately?
So a transfer on death deed is generally what we'd be referring to. So on say your home, you could have your home set up with a transfer on death deed, and that would avoid a will. It doesn't matter what your will says. If you set up your home or other real estate with a transfer on death deed, then that title to that property will pass to the named beneficiary on that transfer on death deed without the need for probate.
So would you have both?
That's why you need to go meet him in person so he can help you figure out. This is just your clues that you need to get a personal consult. And I said I would take, I walked away from you, Carl. I'm sorry. We'll take two quick ones and then save your questions because we might have time at the end.
Just a quick statement. My wife and I just went through taking care of all of our estate. Our wills were over 30 years old, and we contacted the base legal office, and they walked us through the entire thing. It was amazing.
Great job.
Good, yes.
Good
Use all
job.
the resources you can. that
That's
are
what we got
available
to
you.
do, guys. Get it done. Carl.
That last document you was talking about, end of life choice,
Sure.
is that incorporated in a trust?
It's a separate document
Okay.
than a trust.
Just like transfer of death, a separate document?
Right. The trust is just going to be managing your property. So even if you have a trust in place, you certainly would still want a health care power of attorney because the trust is just going to manage your property. Again, that sort of corporation example. We set up this entity, put everything into it, but that entity doesn't have anything to do with your medical decisions or your health care.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Charlie, you had one too.
Can a will be probated or filed with the court long before?
It can't. At least I don't think it can. We don't in Kansas. It's not the practice. It's called lodging a will. And so I know there are other states that you lodge will. My understanding is Colorado, at least maybe 10 years ago when I dealt with a Colorado estate, it was common practice in the law to lodge your will with the court. So you go file it with the court prior to your death, and then you would go to court after your death. Somebody would go to court to find your will that was lodged. I think it's frankly a pretty good idea, and I think it's something that Kansas might consider adopting because you would avoid a lot of questions and uncertainty if you have multiple wills or multiple documents floating around.
Okay. So consulting with a professional, that's the best thing to do. Find professionals that can help you through. I know there were a few more hands, so keep your questions, but we want to make sure that we get to Harmony Homes after Dr. Ray, Oxford Inspired Advisor. So we'd like to hear at least a little bit from you today, your tips for a fresh start. But right now we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Rogers. If you want to come on up here, Ray. Jason, thank you so much. So you guys got that? The will, the trust, 2 different types of powers of attorney, and the advance directives. So 5 essential documents. Thanks, Jason. Okay, I thought we could sit up here if you want to and just have a conversation. So meet my doctor, Dr. Rogers. Okay, thanks so much for being here. It's so cool to have one of the best attorneys in town and one of the best doctors in town come to this seminar. I just think it's amazing. It's so respectful to be here to empower seniors, and I just think it's really awesome. There's so much that Dr. Ray can do for you, you won't even believe it. And so what kind of doctor are you anyway?
Well, I was trained OBGYN, and I stopped doing obstetrics and gynecology, conventional medicine. And since then, over the past really probably 7 or 8 years, I started integrating. I realized that the body tells a story, and it's not always textbook. So you have to listen to the patient. And when you do that, you just kind of put everything together, and everything that we've always taught is not really what it really is. So it's kind of hard to treat patients when you know that that's not what's really going on. So it came to a point for me where it was more important for me to transform lives than to just treat a disease. And in doing further studying with functional medicine, or what we call cellular medicine, it means you go back to the root cause. So it's no longer what you have. You have high blood pressure, you have diabetes, you have dementia, you have cancer, but it's why you have it. And the norm for the body is health. It's not disease. But we tend to wait till we have disease to go to the doctor. But we have the technology and the tools nowadays to make the cell go back and do what it's supposed to do. And in fact, the body is very wise. And if you give it what it needs, it will correct itself. You just have to know what to give it.
All right, can you guys hear? We might have to have you have the mic closer to your lips. Could you hear some of that? That the normal state is health. The normal state is health. And so what she's doing is treating people in advance so they can be healthier rather than wait till there's something catastrophic.
And sometimes you don't present until it is catastrophic because you don't know. But we also take those diseases, states that have already presented, and we're able to get you back to the norm, get the cell back what it's supposed to do, and let it correct itself. So that is possible as well. But if you know better, then a lot of times you tend to do better. Well, most times.
So we're talking about cellular optimization and kind of functional medicine.
So functional medicine is the term that was used for treating the root cause of the disorder, as opposed to traditional mainstream conventional medicine. We say it's the pill for every ill. You go to the doctor, I have this symptom, I'm going to treat you with this. You have this, I'm going to treat you with this. So it's really the what. This is what you have, and this is what I'm going to give you. Functional medicine is, why do you have it? Go back and stop the process of why. So many times, if you're, for example, you're diabetic, we're going to give you medicines, mainstream medicine, that control your glucose, correct? But it doesn't stop the process of how you got there, or the process of it continuing and to start other things that are coming, because they're coming. Many times we're taught that there's no treatment for autoimmune disorders, when in fact, there's only one autoimmune disorder. They just have different names. It's basically your body is attacking the weakest organ. And if you don't control it, it's going to find another organ to attack. So we try to get back to the cause. So I look at it like this. Cellular metabolic optimization framework. That's what it is. And that framework is your body. And there's multiple variables that you're going to work with. So you tend to choose where you want to start. It's like kind of like an onion, and you unravel it. So you hit the biggest system, get the biggest bang for your buck, start to give all the substrates or components that your body needs, and then if you stall out on one thing, such as weight loss or hair or energy, then you start to find out the other components that that person is missing. So it's an individualized care as opposed to just a global, throw it out there, grab it, and see what you get.
Okay, so rather than going into a doctor's appointment and they try to figure out real quickly what prescriptions they're going to write. You are looking at blood tests and all kinds of other things and trying to figure out what is going on and what caused this in the first place and how can we help this person be
so
healthier.
it's education. So education is two parts. So it's a partnership. So I can't give and expect you to take, and you can't just wait for me to tell you and you do. It is a partnership, and you have to invest in your own health and understand the components and understand the misconceptions of what is being told and look at evidence-based medicine. There's a lot of evidence-based medicine. Unfortunately, many of the physicians, they don't want to step out and learn it. So sometimes with functional medicine, if people are not up on it, they're down on it. But there is correct information out there, and to understand the why. And when you live it and you are transformed by it, it's much easier to really believe in it. One of my things is, my story is, at the age of 48, with a diagnosis of breast cancer, I was told that I would have a recurrence in about 3 years because it was a very aggressive form. And that led me to saying, this is, what's really going on. That was at age 48. I am now 62. I'll be 63 in a couple of weeks. And I'm in the best result shape ever. And I'm on every last thing they told me not to do because understanding the why. And what's passionate and dear to me is I'm fortunate to have and blessed, my parents are alive, 88 and 89 years old. And so many of the studying that I do on the cellular level, I apply it to them because it makes a difference, and they look young. And even with certain medical conditions like a stroke in my father 6 or 7 years ago, some dementia as a result of that, and to actually see reversal of short-term memory in a demented patient is amazing. To be able to have a conversation with my father, he can watch TV and recalls everything that he used to couldn't do before because the technology is out there. It's amazing. So many of the things that I do, I look at, yes, longevity is the application of longevity medicine, and the tools are there. So you just have to look at each person's situation, and you individualize that and see what are the disease processes that are occurring that are making you manifest your disease in a different way. And it's all the same. It's all the same disease. It's chronic inflammation. If you do not control the chronic inflammation, you're going to manifest, be it high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, dementia, autoimmune disorders, the same disease. It's just how you're manifesting it.
I don't know if this mic is better, but I'm going to trade you. Okay, so did you get that? She said all disease comes from chronic inflammation. And so that's something you want to be concerned about. What is chronic inflammation?
So inflammation, if you hit your hand or have an injury, you need inflammation because you need the body to say, hey, I'm injured. So it's going to recruit all the different cells to come and stop that injury. You're going to get redness, warmth, some pain and all that. That's normal. You need that to stop the hit. The problem with chronic inflammation is it doesn't stop. It just keeps going on and on and on and on. That becomes a problem because now your immune system can't heal, your body can't heal, and then it starts to go on to other things. So just look at it, for example, take it along with stress, all right? Stress is a good thing, right? You want to be able to fight or flight. If the tiger's running after you, you want to run, right? You don't want to sit down and eat, right? But you can't run all day. The tiger's you got to get away from the tiger. So when you're running all day, that becomes a problem and it breaks everything down. Same thing with inflammation. The interesting thing is that if you look at it, the body is not, it's not like physicians. Physicians are compartmentalized. You have your cardiovascular surgeon, you have your general surgeon, your OBGYN, family practice. The body is not like that. It's all interconnected. So you may think that your heart disease is really heart disease, but your heart disease is chronic inflammation, and it can very well be coming from your gut. So, or your gums, you see? So everything is interconnected, and one thing is going to affect the other. So if you just compartmentalize and treat one system, you're missing the other ones that's causing it to happen. So you're not really getting anywhere with it. And so chronic inflammation, one of the biggest things of chronic inflammation is insulin resistance and prediabetes. And most people, when you say, hey, I'm pre-diabetic, my A1C is, it's a little bit up, that's been going on for 10 to 15 years before the onset of a blood draw to show that you're even pre-diabetic, because it happens in the cells first. 10 to 15 years prior to that. So by the time you're manifesting insulin resistance, it's been going on a while. You're having damage in a lot of your just vessels and your vascular system. That damage has already taken place. It just hasn't showed up in a macrovascular and other different ways that you can see it. But it's been going on for a long time.
And that's something that other doctors might not tell you. So if you've been coming to my seminars for a while, I always say you should have another doctor on the side. You have your insurance doctors that you see for different things, but also have like a functional medicine doctor that you pay out of pocket for, because they're not as restricted and they're going to dig a lot deeper to try to figure out what's going on with the whole system.
So it's really all like interpretation of labs. So your labs, your doctor says, hey, everything looks normal. So you go to the doctor and you have this normal range, and it's really based off of a bell curve. That's how they find out what the normal range is for your region. So they do a bell curve. If you fall to minus 2.5 to the right and to the left, then that's going to be the abnormal. Everything else is considered normal. But it's just a stat. It tells you nothing about how you're feeling, looking, and functioning. So I tell clients, if that's your tank of gas, you're either empty or full. There's no in between. So then you have your level of what it is, and there's that category. You see, you have yours over here, you have the normal over here, and you have this blank right here. Well, that blank category is where you should be functioning when you're optimal, and a functional medicine doctor knows what those numbers are. They don't wait for you to get all the way to the right. So I say that's your red light in your car. If the red light comes on, you're getting low. You keep driving, you're going to run out of gas. So say you go to your doctor and they say, hey, everything looks normal. Mrs. Jones, your labs look wonderful. I'll see you next year. You see them next year, everything looks wonderful. I'll see you next year. You come back next year, oh my, you're diabetic. It doesn't happen like that. It showed up in your numbers if you know what you're looking for. So that's where you want to intervene. You want somebody to be functioning where they're optimal, what makes them look good, feel good, and function well. And it is definitely possible.
Yeah, because it's made a big difference for me and some of my friends, and that's how I found out. I just kept hearing about her. So it's really fascinating. But you're doing things like reversing hair loss, and now you've just been approved to treat dementia. So tell us about those.
So it's really exciting things out here. When you treat the cell peptides are your own amino acids that are in your body, and those are brought together by these different bonds, and if you give the body what it needs, they actually have the better capacity to go back and heal yourself. One of the hair restoration things we used to use with platelet-rich plasma, where we're using your own blood, but you have to stick underneath the scalp in order to get the circulation and the inflammation. Again, key word, circulation and inflammation. That's what all diseasing, aging is. You lose your circulation, you get more inflammation. So all we want to do is restore blood flow everywhere. But with the hair, they have a new technology that's more of a sonogram. It's pretty amazing. We've had consistent results, and if we weren't videoing, we would not believe it. If somebody showed me the pictures that I'm seeing on one setting, I would not believe it myself. But it's just getting the hair that is dormant and getting the follicles with what they need to grow back out. And it's making the hair follicle about 54% thicker just in one setting. It's pretty amazing. So if you're having some hair loss, shedding, thinning, and all that, which is usually hormonal or nutritional or just aging, androgenic, it's a huge difference, and people are they're liking the outcomes, and we're liking them too. Some of the other new interesting things are there is a monoclonal antibody that's called TB006 that has gone through phase 1 and 2 trial, which is no longer in progress. They had such great results. Now you can still get it through enrolled patient access, and it's an IRB controlled thing, and so I just been received my credentialing as an IRB provider. So this is a injection, and what they're seeing is a reversal of dementia depending on how severe your case is. So there is a DNA test that you can do that tells about cardiovascular and your brain, and it will tell you whether or not you're going to respond to this drug. The drug is pretty pricey, and right now all they're able to do is on monthly injections to get people respond, and you can actually see the reversal of the dementia. After 28 days, you can see them start to reverse back because it's blocking the antibody. Our hope is to get extended results, and if a person has some mild cognitive decline, they're starting to see they can maybe go 2 and 3 months. Now, because we do peptides and other different things that we know will impact what's going on with dementia, which is really inflammation of the microglial cells and all that, and the different factors, and there's other peptides, we are hoping that by putting all these things together that we'll get more of a longevity than just 28 days. But many of the clients and all that, their patients or their children, they're happy with it because they say, it's going to cost me $15,000 to $20,000 to put my parent in that long care facility when I can have them at home for $6,000, and they actually are their regular self. And they can see, and behave like someone truly without dementia, and it's really amazing. So hopefully we'll be able to extend that product and how long it's working in the future. But they have some really, really exciting technologies that are here, that are available that many people just don't know about.
What I've found with the functional medicine doctors that I've known is that they go out and educate themselves. They do their own research. They do their own study. They go take a lot of continuing education classes, and a lot of other doctors aren't looking for all that. But one of the powerful stories I heard you tell was when you went to something, you started hearing something that you'd never heard before, never heard medical school, and what happened?
So, probably 10, 15 years ago. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Dr. James Laval, but he's a really big in functional medicine now because he was kind of just starting out with this metabolic code. And I think I had just started really getting into the functional medicine in little pieces. And he had his first class where he had about 15 or 20 people to come to California, and they were all sitting down going over everything. Well, I think I was the only mainstream medicine doctor there because everybody else was functional medicine. And they were talking about these systems, how the thyroid is interacting with the adrenals, how the gut is doing this and everything. And it made sense. It was like, oh my gosh, it makes sense. But I was clueless. And at lunchtime, I went in the bathroom and I just cried because I felt like I had been bamboozled. It's like, man, I've done all this studying and wow, it has nothing to do with everything. So when I came out, he was like, no, you can figure this out. You're smart. I'm like, this is way over my head. This is like crazy. But that was functional medicine, and it was just new to me. And going to catch my flight out, one of the young ladies, our flight was delayed, so she had already been practicing. So we went over a couple of this scenarios. She goes, see, you got it. You start to see how the systems start to intertwine. And it's the same language. It is the same language. And I've had other functional medicine mentees will tell me, they say, hey, we have our own language. If you stay with it, you'll start to understand it. And they're right. It's the same language. It's like anything else with repetition. And it starts to make sense. And then when you start to live it and experience it, it really makes sense.
So the biggest thing that I want to share with our viewers on television and our audiences at the seminars throughout the years is that you may not have to live with some of the conditions that you have, and there might be other solutions that you could seek so you have more time and reverse some things that can really make a difference.
Yeah. So, we pride ourselves on saying, hey, we don't just treat, we transform, And in my mind, it's the same issues, but you have a different answer.
All right, so that old adage, get a second opinion, that holds true today more than ever because there's so many advances in science that maybe not all doctors are in on at all. And so seek those other opinions.
We have system surveys over there. The system survey is a detailed sheet that you can do. It's about 8 groups, and it'll be mild, moderate, severe. You circle what applies to you in that, and it gives you certain scores, and it tells us what's going on in your systems, not just the big systems that you're aware of, but what's going on with your central nervous system, your parasympathetics, your sympathetics. What kind of drive are you in? And we have complimentary mini consultations, so feel free to do a system survey, get in our system, and then come on in and we can tell you what your body's saying about you.
So that was a lot to throw at you, but you're going to hear from her a lot more. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Rogers right now?
I'm a little skeptical because do you take Medicare?
No insurance.
So you take no insurance. So we have to have insurance in addition to you, and what do you charge?
Well, it depends on what service you're seeking. We have different programs as to what we're doing. So we recommend to fill out the initial health consultation form and come and see us for a complimentary mini consultation so we can look at everything and we can tell you how everything is really interconnected in that. So many of the things that we do is hormone optimization therapy. People don't realize that they need hormones as they get older because that's what's depleted. And what happens when your hormones are depleted, your natural hormones, not your synthetic, you begin to get these other diseases, which people think that they're diseases of aging, when in fact, there's not necessarily the disease of aging, it's what's happening because of the lack of other nutrients, vitamins, deficiencies, hormones, and other toxins that now you've built up in your system.
One of the concerns I have here is that you're assuming that we can all afford this without the other doctors.
Correct. No,
Because
I'm not,
the way
I'm not
you're
making that
talking-
assumption because I understand. I mean, and
The way you're
that's-
talking, we don't need the other doctors. We don't need Medicare.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that at all.
I haven't heard you say otherwise.
I told you about what I do. I think Catherine told you why it's always good maybe to have a second opinion.
Yeah.
So no. So functional medicine is purely root cause. Traditional medicine is what? My approach, really what I believe, it's integrative. Nothing is all or none. So it is integrative, and I have other physicians that I work with who are insurance-based.
And, okay.
I'm Catherine's mother. She wanted me to go see Dr. Rogers, and I was kind of skeptical too. And when I went to see my Medicare doctor, my regular doctor, I mentioned Dr. Rogers, and he said he knew her, and he knew of, he had nothing negative to say. And so I am on her hormonal program, and I feel great. I dance 2 or 3 times a week. I go to the Y and I do the elliptical for a half hour several times a week. And I'm 80 years old, and I'm losing some weight, doing it myself with no Nutrisystems or anything else, just my own willpower. And I just feel good. I really do. And so I think it's, it's worth it.
Yeah, that's
You're
why I
basically
wanted her
just
to
giving
see
your
you.
body, all you're doing is giving your body what you had 20 or 30 years ago when you didn't have the issues that you have now. All you're doing is restoring back what you've lost. That is it.
Okay.
So how do you feel about vaccines, like flu vaccines or COVID or all that other stuff, because, how do you feel about that?
We probably all have different opinions. I'll just say that.
Well, one size doesn't fit all. So you don't need a vaccine if you have a great immune system. But how many people have a great immune system and they don't know it? So, go back to polio, go back to the initial COVID. That vaccine has some collateral damage, but you're not going to experience the collateral damage if you're dead. So why did so many young people die with COVID? It's because they have metabolic disorders. So if you can find out what your metabolic disorder is and boost your immune system, then you probably don't need a vaccine. But most people don't have a great immune system, or they have metabolic disorders, dysfunction, and they don't know it, and that's where the problem comes in. So it really has to be individualized.
Yeah, so you're not anti-vaccine. You're
No,
but
one size doesn't fit all.
okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right, we got Jason too.
So anyone that's been coming to this for the last few years have watched Catherine's transformation. And I remember when she first started on this road of the second opinion. So I think that speaks for itself.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts on sugar?
Cut it out. That's your death. If you have cancer and you want to help it to grow, eat sugar. Sugar is a bad deal, and the problem with that is you have to learn how to read labels. because the industry has gotten very wise. There's about 85 different names for sugar to trick you on that label, and it's sugar and it's bad. So you want the root of chronic inflammation, you want to feed it, sugar is bad. And also some of your sugar substitutes. You know, you don't want the in the blue. You don't want Splenda in the yellow. If you want aspartame, just go get some of the engine oil out of your car. That's what you're drinking. And Splenda breaks down the chlorine in your body. So you want to do stevia, or more importantly, things that do not raise your glycemic index and cause inflammation. That's going to be like your trehalose, allulose, or pure stevia.
So there's a lot to learn, so that's why, you know, to kind of get into it, because you can really impact your health. Anything else? Okay. All right.
What's the difference with functional and holistic medicine?
Kind of on the same line. They really are the same. Holistic approach, functional. They're still looking at root cause. Holistic may be nothing synthetic. Functional medicine is really holistic. It's just different terminology.
Good question. Okay.
You said you don't take insurance. Are there any programs that you take, and how do you approach TRICARE? Do you approach as an insurance that you don't take, or does it work with you?
Well, TRICARE is an insurance. It's an insurance. So basically, we have in-house financing. We take, if you're on our app, they use Affirm, so you can do installments. And we also have Cherry and Care Credit and things like that.
And some of your labs and prescriptions
Now your
would
labs,
be
you
covered.
can go through insurance, yes.
Yeah, so some of your medications and things could be covered with your insurance.
Correct. So when we do our hormone optimization program, for example, I use bioidentical hormones, not synthetic hormones. Now, I do have some people that are on TRICARE that are at McConnell and all that, and some of their medicines that TRICARE will pay for that we use, then we will put them through their insurance base like that. But a lot of the insurances won't cover compounding. So some of those medicines are compounded. They do have through their insurance, and we'll do that. Same thing as thyroid is a big one. We use compounded thyroid, but some people, their insurance will cover Armor, so we can convert and do that way.
And then some of these aren't very expensive too, by the way.